You are listening to Hold Fast, a podcast where we have biblical truths for daily battles. My name is Kenny. I'm the host of the podcast, and we are closing out a series of podcast episodes today where I have been taking a deeper dive into the mission, vision, and values at MissionWay. You can go back to past episodes if you missed any of those, and I would encourage you to do that. In some ways, these build on one another, but you don't have to be a member of MissionWay for this to be helpful for you. I've said that throughout the series. Yes, I'm taking a deeper dive into the language of the mission, vision, and values of MissionWay Church, but we believe these things to be biblical. We believe these things to be what the Bible outlines as a biblically functioning church, and we're expressing it in unique ways that we see the Lord working here at MissionWay Church. But this is not something like this is only for MissionWay Church. But I do hope and pray the people of MissionWay, you are listening to this. This is helpful to you. This is helping you just really wrap your mind around what it is that we believe God is calling us to as a church, and that you're being challenged individually in that as to what you need to be doing in response to these things. How do you need to be living as a faithful member of MissionWay Church in light of these things that we're saying is our mission as a church, the things that we value. And today, what is our strategy? So that word might seem like a strange word when we're talking about the church, right? Because the church is not primarily a organization or a business. The church is the bride of Christ. However, we have been called to a mission to glorify God and make disciples. So how do we do that? Really, this question of strategy was posed to us in this way. If you as not just me as a pastor, but if you as a church member were sitting across the table at a coffee shop with somebody who was new to our church, and they asked you a simple question: how am I going to grow at your church? How do you all make disciples at MissionWay Church? Could you, in a few minutes, and maybe with a pen and a napkin, could you show them? Could you tell them what the process looks like? What do people do from the moment they walk in the door until the point where they are fully functioning as a member and a disciple within the body at MissionWay Church? And I think that's an important question. So I personally, and I think I've somewhat shared this somewhere in this series, I personally don't naturally and immediately tend to think in these kind of categories, right? Because I'm a pastor. I'm called to shepherd the flock. I'm called to the ministry of the word and prayer. And so these conversations don't always come naturally and easy to me, but they are very important conversations. We have to know what's our strategy. How are we actually going to accomplish the mission that's set out in front of us? That's what strategy does. It is a picture of the process that shows how the church accomplishes the mission. So if our mission is to equip one another to reach the lost, strengthen the weak, encourage the faithful with the gospel, then how do we do that? How do we know that that's happening? So we've talked about in this podcast the marks of an everyday disciple. Like what do we need to see in the lives of people to know that discipleship is happening? And this strategy piece is more of, how does that happen? What does that process look like from a 30,000-foot view? So what I'm going to share with you in this strategy is not everything that MissionWay does to make disciples. This is that 30,000-foot view. It is a big picture view of how we make disciples. And we have actually a diagram that illustrates this. So that challenge that came to us of, could you take a pen and a napkin and outline how your church accomplishes the mission? One of the ways that they challenged us to do that was to draw a diagram that illustrates this and helps people wrap their minds around this. Some churches use kind of a ladder illustration where it's like you take steps in this certain order to arrive at a destination. We chose more of a Venn diagram approach because we don't necessarily believe, although there is a little bit of a flow in this, we don't necessarily believe that the only way you can go through discipleship here is to take this step and then that step and then that step. And we also don't believe that you move on from any of these aspects of the strategy. We should be doing all of these things all the time in the process of discipleship. And so I'm going to actually put a link to this diagram in the show notes for you to follow along if you can. I mean, if you're driving right now and listening to this, please don't pull out your phone and try to pull up a diagram and look at it, but do it later. And many of you have already seen this. It's those 3 circles diagram that we have on that mission, vision, and values page that we've been passing out throughout this series. But I'm going to walk through the different aspects of this. And it's been encouraging to me because some of you have already shared that this piece, the strategy piece in this diagram, was one of the most helpful aspects of this whole thing for you, because it really gave literally a picture of what discipleship, what the process of discipleship looks like here at MissionWay. So, as I've said, if you've not seen the diagram, I'll try to kind of explain it to you as we go. But you have three circles that all intersect in kind of a Venn diagram form. And so, in the three main circles, you have three words, and then in the middle where they all intersect, you have a fourth word. So, I'm going to go through all four of those words and what they mean, what they represent, what we're talking about when we say that. So, let's start this over again. Somebody comes to me and says, "How do you make disciples at MissionWay Church?" I'm going to draw that first circle, and I'm going to say, we gather. We gather together through weekly worship services, first and foremost, to worship Jesus and fellowship with his people. Now, I said that this diagram is not illustrating like steps that you take necessarily. However, this gather piece is most often the very first step that people take in the life of our church. Usually, the first way that people interact with our church as a newcomer, as a guest, is they show up to a Sunday morning worship service, right? They show up to a service, and then from there, they might get connected to other aspects of the church. There are some people who don't first connect with us in that way, right? But I think this is generally speaking the very first way that people will connect here. And this is also one of the most foundational and important aspects of the life of our church for members who have been here since day one, almost 20 years ago. We gather every single week because the Bible commands us to, because it's important for us to do that, for fellowship, to worship Christ together, and to be the church in that gathering. So we gather together, and that continues throughout discipleship. You never get to a point in your faith journey where you don't need to gather with the Lord's people on Sunday mornings. You never get to a place where this gather piece is not important. And I don't think you really ever get to a place where it's less important than it was before. It's always essential to the life of the believer. And I've even shared before that I think that one of your primary spiritual meals as a Christian comes on Sunday morning. It's not your only spiritual meal, and I'm not saying there are not other really important aspects of your spirit of being fed spiritually, but I think the Sunday morning gathering, and specifically the Sunday morning sermon, is one of your main spiritual meals as a believer, and that does not change throughout your faith journey. So first circle, we gather together. Next circle, we grow together through things like discipleship groups. And here at MissionWay, we have an adult Sunday school class on Sunday mornings on the second and fourth Sunday of every month. We have a youth Bible study that meets at that same time. We have two men's groups and two women's groups that meet throughout the week at the church. And we've heard feedback loud and clear and are currently working on a strategy to improve and expand our group's ministry. We want to see and are working to see more discipleship groups. And specifically at MissionWay, we're working to see more what we would call location-based discipleship groups, because our church is a little bit spread out from each other. I mean, some of our members live pretty far away from each other's homes, while the church is kind of a central location to most of our members. Some of us kind of live a little bit spread out from each other. So we think it would be important to find ways for our church to gather together throughout the week through these discipleship groups, and they would be more location-based. So you'd find a group that was a little bit closer to your home, something that was a lot easier for you to do on a regular basis to gather with those people. But in those groups, you study the Bible together, you pray together, you do life together. These are the people that know you, you know them, and you really build deep, meaningful relationships where you can encourage one another in the faith, where you can, as our mission states, equip one another to reach the lost, to strengthen the weak and encourage the faithful. That mission should be happening in discipleship groups as well as we grow together. Now, I'm not saying you don't grow in the Sunday morning gathering. We're separating these out, not because we don't think there's crossover with them, but because we think it's important that you not only gather with God's people on Sunday morning, but you find other ways throughout the week, throughout your life, to be with them and to grow together in your faith with them. Sunday morning services, I've already said, are very important for growth, but we all need more Bible study. We all need more prayer, more fellowship, more accountability. And that's where this grow part comes into play through all of the things that we do outside of our Sunday gathering. So we gather, we grow, and then the third circle, we go. We are not meant to stay in the pew. We are not meant to stay in a holy huddle as Christians. We are to go to our families, to our community, our city, and our world with the life-changing message of the gospel. Jesus said this. He said, go make disciples, right? Now, the command there in the Great Commission is to make disciples, and you fulfill that command as you go. We are seeking and striving to make disciples here at MissionWay Church, but we understand that the call of Jesus to make disciples is also to go. We've said this throughout the series. We gather to worship and fellowship with one another, and then we scatter or we go to make disciples. And I would say that a faithful church member, somebody who is regularly attending church and even regularly attending discipleship groups, but does not share their faith, is constantly being filled spiritually, but never pouring out spiritually to others. And that's an unhealthy place to be. There's no such thing, people have said it this way, there's no such thing as a Christian who is not sent. We're all sent. We're all called to go with and make disciples with the gospel. So this begins, I would say, in our homes. And that doesn't mean that if you are a single person living by yourself, that doesn't apply to you. Our discipleship, our call to go begins in our homes with people that live with us. It begins in our own personal walk with Jesus. And then it extends out to the people and the places that God takes you regularly, whether it's your workplace, whether it's the gym, whether it's a homeschool co-op, whether it's your sports teams, the places that you gather and congregate and hang out with people in the community, wherever it may be, and whoever it may be with that God takes you to, we are called to go. And again, this is true for every believer, every member of MissionWay Church. All three of these things matter. We should be gathering together with one another on Sunday mornings. We should be growing together through discipleship groups, serving together, right? I think I missed that piece on the grow, but part of growing together is joining a ministry team and serving with your brothers and sisters in Christ, and not just fulfilling a task, but actually seeking to equip one another in that, seeking to encourage one another and see one another grow in that. And growth also happens not just in discipleship groups, but in one-on-one discipleship. That's something I'm praying and hoping and planning to see one day at MissionWay, a specifically designed program or system that fosters more one-on-one discipleship relationships at the church, right? So I kind of got off track there, but those are some things that I missed in the grow piece that I wanted to make sure I got. So let me start again. We gather on Sunday mornings, we grow together through discipleship groups, serving and everyday discipleship together, and then we go to our families, community, city, and the world with the life-changing message of the gospel. But there's one more piece of this that I mentioned earlier, and that's that where all three of these circles intersect and connect, and that is the connect piece, right? We call it connect. We are to, all of these things, gather, grow, and go, enable us to connect to one another more deeply and to grow in our faith. This is what brings all of this together. So if somebody asks, like, how do you make sure that people are part of this process? How do you make sure that people are gathering, growing, and going? How do you make sure that somebody doesn't just gather on Sunday mornings and they're not growing outside of that and they're not going and sharing their faith? How do you make sure they're actually continuously walking in these three things? And I would say this connect piece is really important, because in this connect piece, we have what we would call the assimilation process. So when somebody shows up for the very first time on a Sunday morning at MissionWay Church, they are greeted. They hopefully get a connect card and are encouraged to fill that out. I strive, and other staff members and elders and members strive to meet them and get to know them. We hope to get their information. And if we get them to fill out a connect card, the connect card is really, really important. Let me pause here for a minute. If you're a member of MissionWay Church, especially if you're on the Connect team, but if you're just a member of MissionWay Church and you want to know how can you be a part of making sure that guests not only feel welcomed, but are given everything they need to be a part of this church, one of the best things you can do is go meet them on a Sunday morning and take a Connect card with you and encourage them to fill it out. I know that might seem like a cold, very just sanitized process, but that connect card, when that gets filled out, we receive that. And then Jamie, Wilbanks reaches out to them and gives them next steps. I personally reach out to them through a personal text message and give them my number, give them an opportunity to connect more deeply. And then they're told, here's what you do next. And one of the main things they're told to do next is to be a part of Discover Mission Way. This is another huge piece of Connect. We have recently expanded Discover Mission Way to 3 steps, really. We have step 1, which is a class where we go through our just general history of the church and leadership and just kind of give a basic introduction to the church. And then step 2, we take a deep dive in a class into our beliefs, our mission, vision, and values, and what the membership process looks like. And so we're seeking then out of Discover Mission Way to get them in the membership process where they have a sit down with one of our elders and share their testimony of faith, share the story of how they got to Mission Way Church and what God's doing in their lives and the things that they feel like they need, the things they feel like they can contribute to the church. All of those things are discussed as they go through the membership process and they're confirmed as members of Mission Way Church. Then they get put into a group where all of our elders, we have the entire list of the membership at Mission Way Church, and each elder is assigned a different group of people within the membership to reach out to at the very least on a monthly basis to see how can we pray for you, how can we serve you, how can we encourage you. And the elders are right now, we're praying about and thinking about and strategizing how do we do more with that? How do we get more intentional in shepherding the flock of God? So this connect piece is really important. It's what makes sure that people are moving through all of these things. They're gathering, they're growing, they're going in their faith. It's as that we bring them through this process from the very first time they walk through the doors to being a faithful and committed member of Mission Way Church. So I hope that makes sense. I know it's a lot of information. And I think once you see the diagram after everything you just heard me say, I think the diagram really is simple and makes a lot of sense. And is something that you could even use as you invite people to the church and as you tell people about Mission Way and how we do things here. I think it's something easy to remember, easy to draw, easy to illustrate for people and how discipleship happens. And so as I begin to close out this episode, I want to just give a challenge to each of you listening to this. For those who are members of Mission Way Church, and maybe you're a member of another church, this is an important question for you too, but members of Mission Way Church, are you involved in these things? Are you gathering with God's people on Sunday mornings regularly? I've been saying in our adult Sunday school class the last couple weeks that people will sometimes say Sunday morning church is a Saturday night decision, and I understand what they mean by that, and I think it's good. But I want to take that a step further and say Sunday morning church is a life decision. It is a decision that you make now for the rest of your life. This is what we do, and not in a legalistic, just cold-hearted way. But this is what we do. We gather with other people. Are you gathering with your church? How are you growing with your church family outside of Sunday mornings? Are you gathering with God's people anytime outside of the Sunday morning gathering? Because Sunday mornings are great, and I would encourage you to come early and stay late and have fellowship with God's people. But are you coming to family table events once a month? Have you joined any of the discipleship groups? Do you meet with other believers from Mission Way Church in your home, in their home, out at restaurants, maybe after Sunday morning service? Like, how are you growing in your faith? How are you praying for one another? How are you encouraging one another? How are you discipling one another? Have you found a Paul, Timothy, or a Barnabas yet? How are you growing with your church family? How are you going? Who are you sharing the gospel with? Who are you praying for and investing in and spending time with? Who has God placed in your life that's close to you but far from him that you should be reaching with the gospel? And again, first on that go piece, first and foremost, how are you doing that in your home? If you are a parent with kids, are you discipling your kids? Do you have regular family worship together? We have resources on the Mission Way Church website. It's called the Family Discipleship page. We have resources to help you do that. Utilize those. Go there and start learning and growing in that area today. How are you taking the gospel to your home? How are you taking the gospel to your workplace, to your community, to the places that God takes you, to the people that God has placed in your life? Are you involved in these things? How are you connecting to the life of your church? And maybe you would say, I've been around for a little bit, but I'm not really doing these things. Let me encourage you. We're going to be talking more in the days to come on Sunday mornings and through the e-newsletter and things like that about Discover MissionWay and the steps that we've added to this process. It used to just be one class. It's now been expanded into, I said a 3-step process earlier. It's those 2 classes. And then the third step is an elder or a staff member, somebody from the church who's going to meet with you after you've been through this whole process and just check in to see how are you doing, what do you need, how can our church serve you, what are your spiritual gifts, and how can you serve the church? Have you joined a team yet? Have you joined a group yet? How can we make sure you are more connected to the life of the church? That's the third step of the process. It's not necessarily a class, but it is an intentional step that we're going to be taking. And so let me encourage you, if you feel like I'm not really connected, I'm not really doing these things, be on the lookout for opportunities as the Discover MissionWay classes come. You might say, I know a lot about the church. I understand that. But if you don't feel connected, I think that's one of the best places to begin to make those connections, to begin to figure out how is God calling you to go deeper into the life of this church. And it's a great place, by the way, to encourage new people to go as well. Sometimes we make the mistake of believing that it's the pastor and staff member's job to make all these things happen, to make sure people are gathering and growing and going and connecting with one another. No, it's all of our jobs. It's your job on Sunday morning as a member of MissionWay to meet new people and to give them a Connect card and to introduce them to a staff member, a pastor, myself. It's your job to encourage the people that you've been meeting and getting to know to go to Discover MissionWay and to meet with one of the elders and to pursue membership. We should all be encouraging one another in these things. So this strategy at MissionWay is not just the strategy for the staff and the elders to accomplish, it's the strategy for all of us as members to be a part of and to help others be a part of and go through as well. So that's it for this series of podcast episodes. And if you have further questions or want to discuss this a little bit more, please reach out to me. I'm going to get back to, Lord willing, next week, regular episodes of Hold Fast, meaning not this particular series. And if you have questions for this podcast that you'd like me to talk through, maybe it's something specific to the life of MissionWay Church, I'm happy to do that in this podcast. I primarily do this podcast for the members of MissionWay Church. So if you want me to talk about something specific to the life of our church, send in a question or a comment. I'm happy to do that. If you have something related to the daily walk, the daily Christian walk, theological questions, whatever it may be, send them my way. I'm happy to do them here on the podcast. I pray that here at MissionWay, this series that we've gone through really is just step one of us entering this new chapter. It really is just step one of all the things that God is going to do in this next, if I can use this word, season of ministry that God has before us. I'm excited about the things that I've already seen. Please know that your elders and staff are in more and more intentional conversations about how to bring these things more and more into the life of the church, and we need your help. We can't do this without you. We can't do this if every member is not committed to this process. So what's your next step? What do you need to do based on the things we've talked about in this series, based on the things that God has been prompting you in and convicting you in? What step do you need to take to gather with God's people, to grow with God's people, to go with God's people, and to connect with God's people? I pray that all of us are continuously on this journey of discipleship together as a church family, and I know it will bring glory to the Lord, and I know it will make disciples if we would do that. So thanks as always for listening to Hold Fast. I pray that it was helpful and encouraging to you, and Lord willing, I will be back next week with another episode, something not a part of this series, so I'm looking forward to that. Hope you'll join in and listen to that as well. Have a great rest of your day or week, whatever it is you're listening to this, and God bless.